Hello students, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am going to discuss about the Victorian novel. As you know, the 19th century was the great age of English novel. This was partly because this essentially middle class form of literary art was bound to flourish increasingly as the middle classes rose in power and importance. Partly because of the steady increase of the reading public with the growth of lending libraries, the development of publishing in the modern sense, and other phenomena which accompanied this increase, and partly because the novel was the vehicle best equipped to present a picture of life lived in a novel society against a stable background of social and moral values by people who were like the people encountered by readers. And this was the kind of picture of life the middle class reader wanted to read about. The novel, like the medieval fable, is what Northrop Frye calls a low mimetic literary form. The purely escapist impulse to read about a high aristocratic world of ideal gallantry and beauty is as lacking in the typical Victorian novel reader as the desire to see the fundamental problems of human experience projected imaginatively and symbolically through the presentation of great figures acting out their destiny on the grand scale. The Victorian novel reader did not want to be entertained, and in a sense, he wanted to escape. What he wanted to be entertained, and in a sense, he wanted to escape. A minimum aesthetic distance. He wanted to be close to what he was reading about, to have as little suspension of disbelief as possible. To pretend, indeed, that literature was journalism, that fiction was history. Of course, the novelist fooled them, at least the great ones did. The ordinary reader may have had the illusion that what he was reading was a kind of journalism, a transcript of life as it was happening around him, without the modifying effect of literary form and imagination. In fact, the great Victorian novelist often created complexes of symbolic meaning that reached far deeper than superficial pattern of social action suggested to the casual reader. The novels of Dickens, for example, are full of symbolic images and situations, suggesting such notions as the desperate isolation of the individual. The grotesque and the eccentric in Dickens' characters became almost the norm, suggesting that life is atomistic and irrational, and that patterns of communication can never be real. But it has been left for modern criticism to investigate this aspect of Victorian fiction. The great majority of borrowers from Moody's libraries and readers of serialized novels in magazines wanted to read about life as they thought they knew it. The impulse that makes modern television viewers so devoted to plays of ordinary life, dealing with people like themselves with whom they can identify themselves, but liberated by plot from the dullness of life as they actually lived it. This impulse helped to create the English novel and to sustain it during its brilliant 19th century career. That this indicates a gap between the demands of art and the expectations of its audience. Need not surprise us, such a gap is commonplace in literary history. The best Victorian novels transcended the requirements of its audience and can be read by later generations for different and perhaps profounder reasons. But the same can be said of the best English drama. The requirements and expectations of a given audience can help to explain the rise and flourishing of a given literary form, but cannot explain its true nature or value except with reference to ephemeral works produced by hack writers merely to satisfy the contemporary demand. With Charles Dickens, journalism and melodrama are gathered into the novel to give it new life and a new and important place in middle class entertainment. If he learned something from 18th century novelists, especially Smollett, he learned even more from his own circumstances and observation. Combining an extraordinary relish for the odd, the colorful, and the dramatic in urban life and human character, with a keen eye for the changes which the Industrial Revolution brought into England in his lifetime, an acute consciousness of his own lower middle class origin and the unhappy circumstances of his own childhood, which included his father's imprisonment for a debt and his own much resented employment at a blacking factory as a youngster, and a sentimentally humanitarian attitude towards human problems. Beginning as little more than a comic journalist, he soon discovered his special gifts as a novelist, gifts which enabled him to present to his delighted readers stories set in his own day and the recent past, in which the vitality of the characters, the enthusiastic savoring of their physical environment, the movement from comedy to pathos, and from compassion to horror, and the sheer high spirits with which he rendered eccentricities. Villains, unfortunates, hypocrites, social climbers, no breaches, criminals, innocents, bureaucrats, exhibitionists, self deceivers, roisterers, and confidents, men, human oddities of all kinds, each with his own physical and moral individuality, and each involved in a rich pattern of interacting lives played out against social background, whose sights and sounds and smells were rendered with a vivid particularity, in which all this is presented with an almost reckless profusion. Dickens began with a great sense of life and a little sense of form, capturing the individual oddity, the extravagant moment with remarkable skills, and then marketing time, as it were, until he could introduce another such oddity and another such moment. Sketches by Bodge is lively journalism merely, but with the Pickwick Papers, issued in monthly parts in 1836 and 1837. We can see him feeling his way from humorous journalism to something more. The full title is significant: The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club, containing a faithful record of the perambulations, perils, travels, adventures, and sporting transactions of the corresponding members. This reminds us not only that the Pickwick Papers were originally planned as a series of sketches to accompany a set of sporting prints, but also of the picaresque tradition in which Dickens began his career as a novelist. Pickwick began as a burlesque, but was soon moved into a more substantial kind of picaresque comedy, where the interest lies not only in particular absurd incidents, but also, and more significantly, by the way in which given characters react to new kinds of environment. Each of the characters soon develops his own moral, physical, and emotional qualities. And the interest is kept up by showing how these qualities reveal themselves in new and unexpected situations. The simplicity, benevolence, and harmless egotism of Mr. Pickwick are placed in ever more testing circumstances. And the benign character who sets out in order to observe the world which he thinks he understands is faced again and again by situations which affront all his assumptions, threaten his status as a benevolent observer, and lead him in the end, after the most violent experience of the indifference and the intractability of the world of other people, to retirement and the closed circle of his friends, followers, and dependents, on whom he can confidently turn his benevolent observation. But the interest doesn't lie merely in our watching the behavior of Mr. Pickwick and his friends as they react to different environments. The characters themselves are drawn with lively humor, and the individual traits of Alfred Jingle or Sam Weller are pleasing and amusing in their own right,